Hey peeps, it's Tripl-L and welcome to the second video in a series of discussion videos that I'm doing for the Pokemon Sun and Moon, the Alola forms. And in this video today, I just want to get right into it. We're talking about Vulpix, we're talking about Sandshrew, we're talking about what I think is the mechanism behind the form change. Why did they change forms? How did they do it? Surprisingly, I'm on the camp that it is evolution, real world evolution, Darwinian evolution. So peeps, if you want to listen to that, stick around, just sit back, relax, and let's get started. It's gonna be a fun one. So here, I'm gonna show you a bunch of Pokemon. These are all Pokemon that have different forms. Now, of all these Pokemon, can you figure out which of these Pokemon the Alola forms are most similar to mechanic wise? Which of these Pokemon do you think are the closest to an Alola form, or the idea of the Alola form? I can tell you from now, it's definitely not Castform. No, it's not him. It's definitely not Rotom. If you said Shellos, well great, we're on the same line of thought. Shellos, I think, is the one that's most similar to the Alola forms, at least in the mechanisms behind why there's different forms. Because Shellos' forms are dependent on the area that they were born in, or pretty much the area they originated in. In Sinnoh, they were separated into the West Sea and the East Sea. Mind you, the Alola forms are much more drastic, but the basic idea of the mechanism behind the form change is there. And you guys should probably know it if you have done middle school biology. What is the mechanism behind the Alola versions? What is it that's causing it? Well, it's real world evolution. Not Pokemon evolution. Pokemon evolution is much more similar to possibly bug metamorphosis, which makes sense given the fact that Pokemon was based off of the creators' fun childhoods of catching insects. So evolution, just to simplify it, is something that happens over time. An animal changes to adapt to its environment. But how does adaptation actually work? It's not something that happens day by day or just overnight. No, it's something that happens over generations. So let's have this situation, right? Let's say the initial generation of Sandshrews landed on Alola. What happens there? Yeah, nothing much. They move to snowy terrain. It's a pretty tough life. Now those generation of Sandshrews have offspring. The offspring, yeah, maybe they're the same as Sandshrews, but let's say something happens. Let's say one Sandshrew in particular develops the ice typing. In regular biology and regular life, that would have been called a mutation. And mutations can come in three varieties: harmful, neutral, or beneficial. Now, the thing you have to realize about evolution, or just the adaptation process, is that it is very much a game of statistics, and a mutation will either increase the odds or decrease the odds of a species surviving. So here's what happens. Let's also assume that in that same generation of Sandshrews, there was a Sandshrew that was born with giant enlarged eyes. Now, what happens as natural selection happens over the course of their generation? Maybe there's a giant hailstorm. Maybe all the hail is hitting the Sandshrew with enlarged eyes, and that Sandshrew ends up dying because he had too much of a target on his face. Well, okay, his gene pool is completely destroyed. There's no offspring, no next generation is going to be developing the same enlarged eyes. But let's look at the ice typing Sandshrew. The ice typing Sandshrew does not suffer from hail, does not suffer from this kind of environment. So he actually continues on to the next generation. His offspring continue on. Then we look at the other Sandshrews. Okay, they're like neutral at best to surviving at this harsh climate. They could probably change their behavioral patterns. But let's say one Sandshrew decides to roll into a ball, and he starts rolling into a giant snowball. He wipes out like three of the other Sandshrews, and then he falls into a lake. And then one other Sandshrew maybe slid across a frozen lake and fell into the hole that was made by the Sandshrew that rolled into a snowball. Okay, well right there we've eliminated quite a few of the Sandshrew population. So we go into the next generation. That Sandshrew had offspring. We don't know how many. I doubt Pokemon mate for life. So he has offspring. They continue the ice typing. The mutated gene continues on. And then we have a situation where another Sandshrew across the pond has a steel typing. Okay, now I'm not going to go through the process again, but over many generations, the ice typing and the steel typing, because they are maybe more suited to this environment, will start propagating a bit more, and eventually we'll have an ice type and steel type Sandshrew be the majority. Now again, this is a process that happens over many generations. The same evolution based process could even be argued for Vulpix and also the recently leaked Alola forms. Alola Meowth and Alola Marowak. Vulpix, you can kind of see what could have happened pretty easily. A regular Vulpix goes to a snowy terrain, it stands out like all heck. All the predators can see a Vulpix right there. And then finally, when a Vulpix is born that has a white coat, it can hide better. And in hiding better, it has a better chance of promoting its genes towards the other generations. The same thing happened with Marowak, and Marowak's description is actually way more, I guess, in your face about it when it says it developed the typing specifically to fend off natural predators. So eventually, when you had Marowaks or Cubones being introduced to Alola, the Cubones are not doing very well, the Marowaks aren't doing well. Finally, a Cubone's born that has this specific typing. That typing does so well that it just continues to propagate through generations, while the other Marowaks kind of go into decline. The new Ghost Fire or Fire Ghost Cubone propagates better, and over time we have now a Alola Marowak. For Meowth, it's actually an interesting case of selective breeding. What could have easily have happened was that a Dark Meowth was first born into the Alola royal family. They took a liking to it. They specifically had that Meowth breed with other Meowth. Those Meowth offsprings, maybe a few of them came out as more Dark Meowths. They used all those ones to continue the breeding process until they finally had enough Dark Meowth to a point that one could have, and got to propagate in the natural world. It's really a process that happened over many generations. Usually this would happen over millions of years, but because Pokemon are already so genetically unstable or so genetically transmutable, you could see it with the fact that they go through evolution. Maybe this process could have been accelerated for the Pokemon world, and they could have made those adaptations faster, maybe within 100 generations. Who knows? Pokemon, right? Anyway, this is a really cool process, and chances are this is most likely what happened, especially when all the bios make this point of putting out how adaptation worked, or how these Pokemon were always adapting to their environments. And this is adaptation. It's not really something that can happen in an organism's lifespan. It's something that happens across generations. So when it comes to predicting a Alola top 10, it really could just be an exercise of figuring out what Pokemon are more likely to adapt to an environment. And you know what? Really, it's Game Freak's discretion how they choose to implement that mechanic. Because as we saw with the Meowth, they're totally willing to have humans interfere with the breeding process. But when it comes to making that top 10 list, there's one Pokemon that throws it off, and that is Executor, because the way that Executor's bio is kind of describing it makes it seem as though its mechanic seems to be slightly more comparable to something that happens to a certain group of other Pokemon. But to find the answer to that, what I think might be going on, you'll have to tune into the next video. So, peeps, till next time, have a good day. I hope you enjoyed this one.